Good evening and welcome back to Cruising Off Duty. I am Craig. Well, if you've been watching the channel, you know I've been doing a lot more reviews of products that help you live off the grid longer. In my case, I'm a boater. That's my main reason for getting into this type of product. Because when I'm in my boat enjoying my summer vacation, I want to live off the grid, away from shore power, as long as I can while still having those comforts of life on my boat. Same thing would be true if you're an RVer or a camper, where you're boondocking, of course, away from shore power, away from camping power in this case, and you want to enjoy the time longer without sacrificing too many of those modern conveniences of cell phones, laptops, iPads. You get the point. We're in an electric generation where everybody is kind of dependent on those things just for kind of like downtime enjoyment, and that's important. But now that we are living in this time of turmoil, there's even more of a use case for just having your home prepared for a potential power down situation for an extended period of time, whether it's hours, hopefully only, but more likely if we had a situation, let's call it that, it's probably going to be down for days, weeks, maybe even months. So you want to get yourself prepared with something that you can depend on to live off the grid longer. And as I've mentioned before, there's three components to that live off the grid longer. You need to have a way to generate power. That would be either glass panels or what you see back here. All these things are folding solar panels. You need a way to store power, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. You're going to, in this case, the Power Queen lithium iron phosphate battery. And then you need a way to convert that power from DC into AC, which is usually done by an inverter, or my favorite way of doing it is through a solar generator, one of these products, or one over here. I've got so many in my house right now. They convert the power from DC to AC, and then sometimes they leave it in DC for things like USB-C chargers and whatnot. But you're going to need some way to convert it, and you want to do that in the most efficient way possible. So that second component of storing power, obviously in a solar generator, they have usually got lithium iron phosphate battery banks built in, but you know, they're trying to keep them relatively portable. So the power that's stored in here is not nearly enough for a long-term power outage situation. So you better hope you have a lot of solar panels and a situation where you're getting some decently good sunshine to keep those charged up. Or, as I mentioned in previous episodes, if you can get some of these lithium iron phosphate just dedicated batteries, it's way cheaper. Instead of buying a very, very large solar generator, you can actually buy a lithium iron phosphate, in essence, standalone battery, and I'll show you how you can connect it to any one of the solar generators that you own, or some people like to call them power stations, and extend the capacity while still using all of the features, the AC and the inverter and all that that's built in, without spending an arm and a leg. So let's get on to what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the 12.8 volt lithium iron phosphate battery, 200 amp hour version, the bigger version, from Power Queen. And you're seeing all these wires on top and you're kind of wondering, what is that all about? They not only sent me this battery, they said, we're going to send you a monitor to review as well. And just so you know, they send it to me to review. I'm not paid by them. They don't tell me what to say. All my reviews, I always do the pros and the cons. Now in a solar generator, it's kind of easier to nitpick little problems. Harder on a battery, because if the capacity is there, and I've done the testing, I've charged it full, I've decharged it, and figured out how many watt hours I'm getting, and the results are very, very good. I'll just give you that right now. We'll talk about the results in a second, but that is something I always do, the pros and the cons. I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard to find cons with this because it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles that I can point at and say, oh, it should have done better at that, but we'll get into it anyway. The other thing they sent me was this, what's called a battery monitor. And I just went on their website. I didn't know what it was. I'm like, okay, send it with the battery and I'll review it as well at the same time. I love this thing and I'm shocked at how cheap it is. I went on the American Power Queen site and you can find all their products on their site, including smarter, more pro versions of this with heaters built in and ones with 200 amp BMS instead of 100 amp. Nonetheless, go on their website. You'll see a bunch of stuff. But on the American website, this monitor is only $55. And on the Canadian website, Power Queen website, it's only like $73 or $74. That is a screaming deal. And I'm telling you right now, I'm going to mount this in my boat because I use this type of battery as my house bank battery on my boat. Presently, I have two of these, two 200 amp hour batteries as my home battery bank. And then I have my MPPT controller attached to it, which has a little bit of a monitor like this, but all it tells me is what my voltage is of my batteries. So if my house bank batteries are like at 12.6 volts or something, I'm like, okay, is that closer to full or closer to empty? you know, you can pull up a sheet. I'll bring it over right now. You can print off a sheet like this that shows you what a typical lithium iron phosphate battery should show in voltage when it's being charged and it's still on the charger at 100%, when it's resting at 100%, and then down to what is pretty much dead. In the red is dead. So they're saying anything below 12 volts, you're at 9% capacity, and that's in the red. You should probably stop discharging it at that point, but there actually is an alarm built in this monitor that you can have it do an audible thing, because who's going to sit there and watch their voltage? But yeah, the alarm will tell you if you're getting below a certain threshold, then you set that alarm level. So anyways, you can get one of these. You'd find it on Google it, and you'll find lithium iron phosphate battery voltage chart. So that can kind of tell you, and you need to know that because I'm going to talk about that in a second when we get into the settings of the monitor. But yeah, this monitor is something I'm going to add to my boat, because this tells you not only the voltage, it tells you how many amp hours are remaining and what percent. So we'll get into that, but let's talk about the battery first. As I mentioned, it's a 200 amp hour version. They have 100 amp hour versions. They have, I think, 300 amp hour versions, 400 amp hour versions. This one's a 100 amp BMS. So that shows the power or amps you can charge it at and discharge it at. And obviously, if you needed a higher, faster charging, discharging battery, you can get a 200 amp hour, 200 amp BMS. And just so you know what a BMS, it's a battery management system chip. Unlike the old lead acid batteries that were just a battery and they had no brains at all, this has a BMS. All of these modern ones have a BMS built in, which is a computer chip that monitors the voltage and stops it from damaging itself by being overcharged or discharged past a certain point. If it gets past a certain point, it will just turn itself off automatically so you don't damage the battery. The pros, which I've mentioned many times, of a lithium iron phosphate battery is its longevity and lifespan and how many charge cycles you can get. So getting the stats directly from the Power Queen website, this has 4,000 cycles to 80%. 4,000 cycles is on the high end. I've seen a lot are like 3,500 cycles, 3,000 cycles. 4,000 cycles is really good. What a cycle is, just so you know, it's a full discharge to a full charge is considered one cycle. So let's think about that. 4,000 cycles, 4,000 times of completely killing this 200 amp hour battery and then charging it again. You literally would go 20 years and probably never do that. So this is, just say this thing is going to last you for probably longer than this kind of technology will even be valid anymore. After 20 years, there's probably a new type of battery chemistry that's more efficient, lighter, smaller, whatnot. Talking about lighter, smaller, comparing this to a lead acid battery, this thing weighs 44 pounds, I'm believing from memory. 44 pounds. You might think, oh, that's kind of heavy. It's actually not. You get little nylon handles to pull it. It's easily liftable. And I get these kind of batteries on and off my boat when it's on the hard in the wintertime and I have to climb up a ladder. I just grab it on one side and just hold it with one arm as I climb the ladder. Unlike lead acid, where there's fluid inside that can leak out and burn your clothes and whatnot, this is completely sealed. There's no liquid. These are solid batteries. So you can lift this battery sideways. You can even mount it sideways if for whatever reason the dimensions of the spot you have for it is better to mount it on its side than straight up and down. You can do that as well because there is no fluid. There's also no fumes. So you don't have to worry about if you're putting this under heavy loads, whether charging or discharging. A lead acid battery will give off fumes, and those fumes are corrosive. So if you're in a very small cabin of a boat with the batteries, like my boat is set up that way, the house bank batteries are right under my bed. So if I was blasting in a ton of solar, those batteries would be cooking under there and the fumes would be coming off and I wouldn't even realize I'm breathing them, which could be, long-term not good for your health. So you don't have to worry about that with a lithium iron phosphate battery. So let's get to the testing I did. I said I've charged it, discharged it, charged it, discharged it. And I was shocked that it got more than its stated 200 amp hours. I got 213, almost 214 amp hours out of this battery, which is about 106%, almost 107% of its capacity, which I'm not used to. I mean, sure, batteries can understate and overdeliver, which is what they should do. But I'm so used to the solar generator world where they'll say, oh, it's 1,048 watt hours. And then you're lucky if you get 80%. If you get 85%, you're ecstatic. I can't even remember if I've ever had one, maybe one that I've reviewed where it was 90% of its rated capacity. Most of the times, anything above 80, you're okay with it. Above 85, you're giving it a thumbs up. This got 107% almost of its capacity, which is primo. So good on you, Power Queen, for putting in even more capacity than what you've stated on the outside of your box. So that's good. Now, what kind of cells are in here? These are grade A car battery cells. They're not those little like 18650 little circular batteries all jammed in here, hundreds of them. There's 8 cells in here, and they're grade A car, electric car batteries. So high capacity, obviously lots of cycles allowed to be going through those batteries, and they'll last you a long, long time. The other thing about that is it's lighter than you would expect. A battery this size that was lead acid would weigh you about 110 pounds. This weighs 44. So you're getting a lot of amp hours for a relatively light capacity. The other thing about lead acid, you only get about 350 cycles for a lead acid battery. So if you bought a honkin' 200 amp hour lead acid battery, not only would it be very, very heavy for you to carry, especially going up a ladder, and remember, you have to carry it level, you can't carry it sideways, but you would not only lug that thing in there, but then 350 cycles later, it's trash. And you got to get rid of it. And there it goes in the landfill. It's not very green, right? So that's the one big, big detractor of lead acid batteries. Not only the fumes and the fluid that could leak out and burn your clothes and burn your upholstery and all this other stuff, but you really don't get that many cycles. The other thing too is you get even less cycles if you don't take care of your lead acid battery, because a lead acid battery doesn't have a battery management system. So if you kill that battery down to 0 by accident, let's say you leave your fridge on in your boat, and your solar panels are on, you're like, everything's good, you leave for the weekend, or leave for the week, come back the next weekend and realize your solar panels, and I'm speaking from experience here, in a windstorm, the wire came loose, and so your solar panels stopped charging your batteries, but meanwhile, your fridge has been running for the past 5-6 days and completely killed your batteries. That happened to me with my lead acid batteries. And I walk in and I go to hit the power button on nothing in my boat works. And I go over to the meter and the needle doesn't even lift to say the battery's there. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? That kills your battery. If you have a lead acid battery and you bring it right to 0 where it can't even register a voltage almost anymore, you've permanently damaged those batteries, especially if you've left it at that dead state for days like I had. You come back, sure, you can charge your battery with a battery charger and it will register that it's full, but you'll start running your fridge and everything after that and you'll wonder why is my fridge just blowing through battery power so quickly? It's because you've probably damaged the cells in the lead acid battery. So if you still have a boat or RV using lead acid house bank batteries, do yourself a favor. These have come down significantly in price in the last 5 years. It is so cheap now to get something like this, and then you have the ability to kill it to 0. Because the battery management chip will A, prevent it from doing any damage, and B, it's a different battery technology, a battery chemistry. This doesn't have a damage property if you get below a certain voltage. Again, I guess if you went really low, like 9 volts or something, you might, but the battery management chip would stop it from getting there. It would probably knock it off from being used anything below about 10.5 volts, I'm guessing. This thing says the 0 is 10 volts, but I bet you the battery management is probably not going to wait till it gets to absolutely 0 capacity left. It probably will knock it off at about 10 point something volts. So you can rest assured that if something gets disconnected, like your solar, and you come back and your fridge is running, sure, your fridge won't be running anymore because the battery management chip would have shut it off, but you won't have damaged your battery. So there's some peace of mind and some longevity. So all that to say, only can find pros. It's a sturdy battery, made of ABS plastic. It is, let me just think of the dimensions here. It is 21 inches wide by 8 inches deep by 8.5 inches tall. So that's the dimensions in case you're trying to find a spot on your boat or RV and you want to make sure this will fit. It again is 44 pounds. This one's the 100 amp breaker or BMS system, which means the max draw you can take out of this at any one time is 1280 watts. And how do you get that number? It's 12.8 volts times 100 amps is how many watts you can take out at one time. That's a pretty big draw. And it does have a surge capacity of above that. It says for 5 seconds, it can actually draw 280 amps. So that means if you had, I don't know, a really heavy duty power tool and you charged it through an inverter, a big inverter connected to this. If there was that surge when the motor first engages, it won't snap the BMS off. It'll allow it to go above the 100 amp for it says up to 5 seconds. So there's that kind of peace of mind as well. Now, let's talk about the monitor. So on this battery monitor, what do you get? Well, of course you get the screen that actually lights up. You can actually have a light that goes on. You get 6 meters of this. It's the cord that goes from your shunt to this. So you got 6 meters where you can have your battery in your shunt, let's say under your bed in your boat, and then have this thing over on some wall in your boat. So it's where you can see it easily. And this gives you 6 meters, which is like 20 feet of cable. You get this heavy duty brass shunt. I mean, this thing is solid on a very solid plexiglass mount. You also get some screws to mount it. You get a little tiny screwdriver because that's what you need to put this red wire, this red monitoring wire goes from the red on your battery to this. You leave your negative. You get your normal battery negative on your negative. That goes to the shunt. The red from here goes to the shunt as well into the other port in. And now your negative is here. Sorry, so now your negative is here and your positive is here. So when you connect, that's the way you do it when you're putting a draw on it. And the same when you're charging it, you're going to use the positive here and the negative here instead of going across the battery. Now this thing, I'm going to turn on the light. There's actually a light setting on the screen. So if you, I'll turn it to the highest setting there. You hit the up arrow and now you can see the reading. I'll have to zoom in with my camera while I'm talking. But while I'm talking, you see right now it's at 180 amp hours. I did actually try and take some draw out of this so it shows that it has actually reading the right reading, and it's saying it's 90%. So how do you come up with these numbers? How does it know it's 180 amp hours? Well, when you go into the menu, by pressing the settings button and you go into the menu, you now get to see the capacity where you type in what the capacity of the battery is. You say 200 amp hours. You say, what's the full voltage? I went with 13.7 volts. I was being conservative here. No, that's about right. According to this, resting full battery is 13.6 volts. I know they can go a little higher than that. So I said it's full when it's at 13.7 volts. I said it's zeroed out at 10.2 volts. And I set my alarm. Oh, power off, I set to 10 volts. And then the alarm is set to how many amp hours do you want for it to start beeping at. I set it to 10 amp hours. I don't know if it'll ever get down there. I set it really, really low. It might run out of, like the BMS might knock it off before it even gets there. I had it set higher and it is an audible. You heard the beeping. Hear that? When the alarm's going off, it does that deep, 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 deep. And of course I went to bed and I was letting this charge a solar generator just to discharge it so I could do the cycles. And this got below the alarm setting that I'd set a little bit too high, and all night it was beeping. I didn't hear it, but my roommate did. And he came in and he was trying to unplug it. How do I get this thing to stop beeping at me? So yeah, I set the alarm a lot lower. Alarm is at 10 amp hours, which is pretty low, and my power off is set at 10.2 volts. So there you go. So you set all that in the thing, and then when you've killed it, this is the way they say to make sure that this system knows exactly where it is. When this is dead in your estimations, as low as you want it to go, you press and hold the down arrow, and that tells it that's as low as you want to go for it to say 0% on the screen. So when you go back out to the screen, that's how it got the 90% 180 amp hours, is because I set it to 200 amp hours in the menu, and I set what the zero threshold is, and it does the math for you. And it even has a setting in there that says every time there's a cycle, it does actually keep track of how many cycles you've done. Every time there's a cycle, I asked it to take 0.1% of the battery capacity away. So that 200 amp hours, at some point, if I did enough cycles, it would start to say, when it's full, it would start to say, oh, you have 198 amp hours, because I'm telling it to subtract from the maximum 200 every time I do a full cycle. And now in a way, I probably didn't need to do that because I already showed you that it's even though it's rated at 200 amp hours, it's getting 200 and what did I say, 14 almost amp hours. So I guess I didn't need to give it that. Please subtract from the total, because I'm significantly above the 200 amp hours when I first started. Anyways, this is going in my boat 100% for sure, and replacing the Redodo I have off my MPPT controller, because again, like I said, the MPPT controller really only tells me what my volts are, and I have no idea off the top of my head what 12.9 volts is, which I'm now looking at this, and 12.9 volts says that's your battery's at 20%. I would have thought, oh, it's a 12.8 volt battery. If it's at 12.9, it's full. No, that's not how it works. This 12.8 is kind of specifying what the load rate is, you know, what kind of like the line in the sand bar normal reading. when you first charge this battery and then take it off the charger, you're going to get more like 13.4 volts is what it's going to read on any voltmeter. Okay, so now we're going to put a load on this to show you that it also registers what the amps are going out and what the watts are going out. And also then we'll charge it with a battery charger on the same two positive and negatives on here, and show you that it also does in reverse. It'll say you've got minus something amps going in and minus something watts. Means it's charging, not discharging. Okay, I've talked about this in previous videos when I'm dealing with lithium iron phosphate batteries and saying how it's the inexpensive way to add capacity to your solar generator. Okay, so first thing to do, buy yourself on Amazon one of these lithium iron phosphate. Actually, it does all kinds: lithium, AGM, lead, LiFePO. It's a 20 amp 12 or 24 volt battery charger. They're only like 40 bucks, 50 probably in Canada, 50, maybe in the States 40 or less. So the most important thing is that comes with a alligator clip, a really solid cable too. Alligator clips to XT60 in this case, which I have so many solar generators that use XT60, and even if you need an XT90, you just buy a little attachment that converts from XT60 to XT90. So then what you do is you connect it to your battery. First, red on the actual battery, black on your shunt. Now, I'm not 100%, maybe you could just go straight to the battery. I'm not 100% sure. I've been going through the shunt just to make sure it's read by the monitor. And then of course you don't have this plugged into anything yet. So you find your solar input on your solar generator, which is down here on this one. And when I do, it's going to wake it up because it senses it's got solar panels coming in. So that's what it thinks it has. It thinks it has a solar panel. And as you can see, it's charging. And on this one, it's saying it's bringing in 123 watts. So there you go. With a 12.8 volt lithium iron phosphate battery, you're bringing in about 124 watts. Did I say volts? Watts. That's great. Now, if your draw is bigger than that, what I've been doing is you can take two batteries and put them in series and turn a 12.8 volt battery into a 25.6 volt battery, which then more than doubles or about doubles the solar charging capabilities of your solar generator. So instead of bringing in 124, you're going to bring in 250 watts, which again, if you're using it for stuff and you've got a fairly decent amount of draw coming off, that might be what you want. If the thing is slowly dying, you're using 250 watts, and when with only one battery, you're bringing in 125. You're still slowly depleting your solar generator. So there you go. One workaround again is take two of these batteries and put them in series to make a 25.6 volt battery. Or what I found out being on the Power Queen website, they actually sell a 25.6 volt, 200 amp hour, or some other sizes as well, batteries. You just go with a toggle at the top and pick 25.6, or I think they call it 24 volt, but when you get in there, the casing actually says 25.6 volts. So if you're using a battery specifically to supplement a solar generator, probably better to go with the 24 volt battery, which works out to 25.6, because you'll be able to charge your solar generator so much faster than if you just did a 12.8 volt battery. So hopefully that makes sense. So going back to the monitor, you can now see it's telling me almost identical. It's using 10.5 amps, which works out to be 139 watts is what is coming through the monitor. And I'm still at 90%, but I've gone down from 180 amp hours to 179, and this will just keep ticking down. It also tells you in hours how much time is left. It says there's 17 hours and 4 minutes for this battery to be killed based on the constant draw being what it is right now. So great information. So now the next thing is let's see what happens when we charge the battery, how the screen changes. Right now it's saying minus 10.2 amps. When I charge it, it's going to say plus 2 or it's going to say whatever amps but in a positive way. Okay, so now all we have to do is reverse the process. So that battery charger I was telling you about, I'm now going to plug it into the exact same solar generator just because it's right here beside me. And then I have to turn on the AC here. And you're going to have, well, this solar generator always seems to make noise. I've got other ones that are pretty much silent. We'll see if this one starts making noise. It was making noise even charging, so we'll see. So this thing, so now this thing's charging. You can see it blinking. Let's see if it wakes up and starts charging a little faster. What's it charging at right now? Okay, the battery is obviously fairly full, so it's probably not going to charge super fast because when you're topping up a battery at the very end, it doesn't charge super fast. It says It's 13.7 volts, so it's pretty close to full. And it's at, oh, I didn't have it set at the highest setting. I just turned it to the highest setting of 10 amps. And it is now, sorry, 20 amps. It is now bringing in 16.5 amps as it stands right now. So let's see, well, even more than that, I guess. So here's the monitor. It now says, and it starts to do the flashing light thing. When you're charging it, it's blinking. When you're discharging it, it's just a solid light. So it says it's bringing in 19.3 amps, which is right, because I've got this set to 20 amps. It's bringing in 259 watts. So there you go. And it's now saying it'll be fully charged, and then the clock changes from a countdown clock, in essence, how long till it's dead, to how long till it's full based at this charge rate. It's saying an hour and 4 minutes this battery will be charged. So let me unplug that, because that fan can kind of get annoying when I'm trying to record on a microphone. So there we go. So that pretty much summarizes everything here. These Power Queen products are top notch. Like I said, the capacity of this battery is above its stated amount. The build quality of this monitor is really substantial. I mean, this shunt is so heavy and thick, and you know, with this 6 meters of cable and all that stuff. And then to find out the price, that's the part that caught me off guard. I was like, okay, what's this thing cost? I go on the website, 55 bucks American, $74 Canadian. That doesn't seem right. But here it is, that's on the website. And let me just say, the monitor can be used on any battery. It doesn't have to be a Power Queen battery. So if you have other batteries and you want to, I don't know, swap the monitor off this one onto a different battery because you're going to use it in a different circumstance, this will work. It's just using the amps and the volts. Now, granted, if you switch to a 100 amp hour battery, you're gonna have to go in the menu and change it to 100 amp hour from 200, because I set it to 200. But this is not a Power Queen proprietary monitor. It's just made by Power Queen, but you can connect it to a Zoom's battery or a Redodo battery or, you know, any Lithium battery, any of the other brands of batteries, and it'll do the same thing. So I just love this thing, and it's going to go on my boat. So that's pretty much it. 2 thumbs up for the battery. Does above capacity. Oh, I should mention, if you are the type of person that wants a battery that is heated, they have ones like this that have a heater built into it, so that if you're keeping it in a very cold climate, it has a heater. Again, you don't necessarily, I live in Canada, it's cold outside. Build yourself a wooden box with some insulation, even if you're keeping this in an unheated shed. As long as you're charging it and discharging it regularly throughout the day, the battery will give off some heat on its own. So therefore, in an insulated box, it shouldn't have a problem where it's going to go below zero. In case you aren't aware, lithium iron phosphate batteries are not really supposed to be charged if they're below freezing. So as long as you can keep the battery above freezing, it doesn't have to be room temperature warm. It just has to not be below freezing. So there you go. So if you need a heated battery, they have those. If you want an even bigger 300 amp hour battery, 400 amp hour battery, they have those. Let me mention too, this battery can be in series and parallel up to a 4P, 4S configuration. 4P means you can put four of these batteries in parallel. So what you'd have there is you'd still have a 12.8 volt battery bank, but instead of 200 amp hours, you'd have 800 amp hours. Or you can go in series where you have 4 of these in series, and that way you'd have a 52 volt battery bank, but it would still be 200 amp hours. But if you go 4 parallel, 4 series, you now have something like, see, it's almost 42 kilowatts of power. It's crazy. You could run your whole home on that. And then you'd have you'd have a 52 volt battery bank that's also 800 amps deep at that voltage. It's just crazy big battery bank if you do that. So just something, you know, it is expandable. And I will put some links in the description for discount codes and whatnot. But just so you know, if you buy more than one battery, they discount the price. So they give you a price for one battery, and then they say if you buy 2, you get an additional discount, 3, you get additional, 4, you get additional. So if you are building one of those monster home backup systems and you're buying a lot of batteries, you're going to get a pretty good price per battery when you buy in bulk. So hopefully you found this informative of my review of the Power Queen 12.8 volt 200 amp hour battery and the monitor, which I absolutely love this monitor, especially for the price. So if you found this informative, show the channel some love by giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, this is Craig signing off, wishing you safe cruising.